What we're going to do is we're going to have two sessions tonight. So the first one's going to go about 45 minutes, and then we're going to take a little break. And there's still some snacks back there, and we'll have a little restroom break, whatever, stretch your legs. Then we'll come back for the second session. And so it's going to be a blessing for those of you that were here this morning. Lots of great information, and especially when we deal with relationships. Everything is about relationships. And you know, it's always about people, right? It's always about people, and whether it's about our kids, our marriages, whatever, it's about relationships. So we're very thankful to have Steve Norris be here with us. He is coming to us from Conway, Arkansas. He and his wife, they have been married 44 years, and Sandy is also helping to teach some of the classes. So 44 years of marriage, 45 years of ministry, and helping to serve in the kingdom. 3 daughters and multiple grandkids here. So what a blessing. They've been at the Robinson and Center Church of Christ for the last 13 years, and this is their third time coming out here to be with us at Salt River. So we're blessed to have them, and let's get ready. Man, we've got pens back there. He's got notebooks. If you don't have that notebook, raise your hand. He typed these out, so we'll get those for you, and you guys can take some notes on here, and it will be a great blessing. So, brother, come and preach the word, please.
Do you have a good afternoon? Yes. I'll just admit it. It's not very noticeable now, thankfully. I am proudly wearing my Navajo taco. Boy, that was delicious. That is wonderful, wonderful. It was a great time of fellowship and just a great blessing and just great food. But I was like 3 bites in, and I looked down and I already had a big drop on me. So a little bit of soap, I at least made it go to the back so it's not quite so obvious. You'd have to see pretty good to see it anyway, but otherwise I wear it with pride. So that's just who I am. We're going to be talking, as we've said this morning, about relationships. Tonight, particularly, we're talking about marriage. I've been at this a while. I know some of you, when he says I've been in full-time ministry for 45 years, and some of you are thinking, I didn't know they hired 10-year-old preachers, right? I know no one's thinking that. I understand that. That's okay. I was in full-time located preaching ministry at 19 years old. So at 45 years, I'm now 64, 45 years of ministry, 64 years old. So I have been at it for a while. And I'm smart enough on the topic of marriage not to open it up for questions. Now, I jokingly say in some circles, probably not terribly appropriate here, but back where we're from, there's this old phrase of, my mother didn't raise a fool. In other words, I'm smarter than that. And my take on it always is my mother may have raised a fool, but she named him Philip. And I say that in the side of my brother. It's a joke, family joke. It's okay. Now, I say that to say this, and plus I had 3 things I wanted to say as kind of we started this process, and 2 of them, the marriage is a good application for these principles. So this is really not so much just about marriage, but it's about biblical things for which marriage is probably the easiest illustration. And so I'm going to lecture you tonight. I'm going to lecture you after the break. You can make comments if you'd like, but the nights that we're talking about parenting and relationships with non-believers and relationships within the church, I'm going to lay out the bulk of my material in that first session, and then I want the second session to be much more interactive, okay? Now, we said 45 minutes. Is that 6:45 we will break?
No, 7.
Oh, it's 7 that we will break. Okay. Is that right? No one's telling me for sure, so I'm going with it. That's right. We're going to break at 7. We're going to come back at 7:15. And It says it goes from 6 to 8. I'm going to promise you that you'll be out before 8 every time, because I'm smart enough to know that you need to like me, so maybe you'll come back tomorrow night, okay? So, again, my mother may have been just a fool. Start with me in Genesis chapter 2. Genesis chapter 2. And if you don't have one of the booklets, it does have the bulk of our material in it. I did that for two reasons. One is that I wasn't sure what exactly, I didn't want to have to operate a PowerPoint myself, and so I thought I'd just put it down in print, and plus you can take some notes and maybe at least look over it another time before you lose this. Did a marriage counseling session, a premarital counseling session with a young man that I had known since he was a young child. I had not known his fiancée, and so when they came to my office, first time I had met her, and I was struck pretty quickly because she very obviously thought this man was absolutely perfect. And I thought, that feels odd. And as we went on, you could tell I was talking about struggles that they might have. And as I was talking about struggles that they might have, you could tell on her face she was saying, "Oh, not us. He's perfect." I kid you not that 10 minutes into the session, I was ready to stop. And I wasn't stopping because they weren't listening to me. I was ready to stop because they were so far removed from reality that there was no way to get them close in an hour or two. I just... Gotta love that. There we go. And I remember she would talk about him, how perfect he was, and I thought, I know this guy. I remember him from a kid. Do you not yet know that he is obnoxious? And I know he's grown up, and he had grown up, but he was still a little bit obnoxious. And, you know, some things are just, some people just, they aren't prepared. They aren't prepared. You know, we do weddings, and we try to prepare them a little bit in a wedding. We know they're not really listening to what we're saying at the wedding, but we're trying to say something at least maybe they'll reflect back on. And you realize that we say for better and for worse just because it's traditional that we do. And they don't believe that. They don't believe us for a moment. They don't think worse is coming. For anybody that's been married over 6 months, can I have an amen that worse is coming? That was rather weak, but I'll take it. The story's told of a man who, in a session like this, they were talking about marriage and being perfect. And the preacher asked, he said, "Does anyone in the assembly claim that they are a perfect husband or a perfect wife?" And he looked around knowing no one was going to stand up, and he said, after a moment, an elderly gentleman in the back slowly came to his feet. And the preacher was kind of thrown off by it, and he looked back at him. He said, "Sir, are you claiming that you are perfect as a husband?" Guy said, "No, sir." He said, "I'm standing on behalf of my wife's first husband because according to her, he was." You know, thank you, brother. And, you know, when we look back, even at other people that we've known, other friends that we have had, it's easy to make that be better than what it ever was, and to remember something that is actually not accurate. We have a way of painting our own memories, don't we? Don't we? Yes, we do. I mean, how good a football player were you in high school? You know, now some people really were, but most people the memory is a little better than the reality. Verse 23, Genesis 2. I start here because number one, it's the place to start. But number two, it's interesting because having attempted to preach and to teach on marriage many times over these many years, do you realize how little is actually said in Scripture about how to be a good wife and a good husband? Now, some people look at that and they say, and I know there are several verses, I'm familiar with that, I'm just saying, in reality, there's not a lot said about it. There's even less said about being a good parent. Now, I think there's an easy answer for that, though. I don't think it's that God didn't think marriage was important or that God didn't think parenting was important. What I think gets back to my argument that Christianity is more simple than we think it is, not more difficult than we think it is, because all you really have to do to be a good spouse, to be a good husband, to be a good wife, is to be a good follower of Jesus. Because everything about your relationship with God applies to every other relationship, and it will make every other relationship what that relationship needs to be. Josh and I got into a discussion just a few moments ago about, how just occasionally we struggle. Sometimes people struggle and sometimes people don't act well. We weren't talking about anything specific. We were just talking about in general terms. And I made the statement to him. I said, my wife will tell you that I am not afraid of conflict. Some people are afraid of conflict. Anybody, is the Enneagram a big thing out here? The personality thing, the Enneagram, is that pretty good? Divine, what are you on the Enneagram? You don't know? Okay, I could tell you. No, I'm just kidding. But it's really big around our area. It's just and it's a great personality tool, and it's got some really good things about it, and it does speak to a lot of things, but in reality, there's not that much difference between us. Yes, we are different people, and yes, as a group, sometimes we're different. And we struggle. We have struggles. And like I said, not being a person who is afraid of conflict, I find myself occasionally, when people really get frustrated, when people really start acting out, I find myself sometimes just walking up to them and saying, brother or sister, why are you not acting like Jesus today? Why did you choose to just take off your Christianity today? So we're not supposed to do that. That's not who we are. That's not who we are. Because this is just me, okay? This is just me. This is free. This is just me. The reason I think so oftentimes in a church environment, I know I should be saying this Wednesday night, but I'm sidetracked, so sorry. The reason people say the things they do is because they believe no one is going to call them on how they're acting. You see, that also is probably the problem with marriage. See, you can say what you want to at work and most people aren't going to call you out on it. They're not going to actually challenge you on it. You can act in unchristian ways sometimes at church, and for the most part, people aren't going to call you out on it. But at home, call you out in a hurry, right? We don't even hesitate. We don't even hold off even for a moment. We call one another out in a hurry, and so marriage seems to be one of our more troubled relationships. It's actually not. We're just a lot quicker to object. We're a lot quicker to say what is truth at home among family. I did find something out. I learned this early as a preacher in a church. people will respect me more if they know I will challenge them when they step out of line. And if you know you can't abuse me without being asked why you're abusing me, then I found out that people won't abuse you. I find it's just interesting that way. And sometimes you have to say, brother, sister, what's wrong? Why are you acting this way? Well, those same things apply in marriage as well. Like say, we tend to think marriage is the place of our greatest conflict. It's not the place of our greatest conflict. It's just a place where we freely speak the truth. And that's what makes it so much different. Here in Genesis chapter 2, Adam's response at the creation of Eve was, "This is at last bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man." Most people would argue that basically what Adam is saying here, because Adam has seen God's creation. God creates one like him. And basically Adam says, wow, good job, you know. But here's the comment, and this is the important part. Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. They will be one. There's the challenge. You see, at work we're not looking for oneness. We're not looking to speak with the same voice and to come from the same exact place. But in marriage we are, because we're supposed to be. Marriage is a difficult relationship because it's the one not only that we expect the most out of, but I think there's argument to say that God expects the most out of it. Now, again, on the Bible is simple, plain. What does Paul keep asking for of the church? And I'm thinking particularly 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 10. I want you to be in agreement. I want you to live in agreement. I want you to be of the same mind and the same judgment. I want you to be one. And it's an interesting word because there's a word that's found in that verse 3 times. The word for be of one mind or be in agreement, according to how your Bible translates it, and where it says be of the same mind and the same judgment. All 3 of those words are the exact same word, and guess what they mean? They mean sameness. I hear a lot of people talking about church unity, and they say, well now, they real quickly kind of run over this simple truth. They say, you know, we're just different people. We're all different. We'll never see everything alike. We'll never be in agreement. So now let's talk about what unity we can have. And I'm thinking, man, you so quickly gave up on what is true unity, which is being in agreement, being of the same mind, and the same judgment. Now, I will agree very quickly that there are things we will never agree on. Who's got the best chili for the Navajo taco? Evans sort of made a claim, and I tried Evans, and his was pretty good, okay? I liked it. It was good, brother. It was good. It was good. I'm betting everybody doesn't agree with that. But yeah, everybody raised their hand that they totally agreed with it, brother. Yes, sure. I'll tell you what, that fry bread was good. Wow, was that fry bread good. I looked over, my wife had gotten the fry bread, and my disclaimer for her would be that before she's teaching or before she's doing something like that, she just doesn't eat much. So she took the fry bread, went right for the sweet version, you know, the sugar and the honey, and didn't go for all the other stuff. But I got the last of it, and boy, that was a way to do it too. But you know, we won't agree on everything, But Paul wasn't talking about agreeing on every single thing in life. What he was talking about was agreeing on those things that are core to the gospel, those things that are core to the teaching of Scripture. And on those things, we must never give up on agreeing on those things. You know, in marriage, there are some things that you're going to have to agree upon. You're not going to agree upon everything. But there's some things you're going to have to agree upon. And you know how much of a struggle, for those of us who have been married a while, you know how much of a struggle it is if you don't agree on how your children ought to be raised and what discipline looks like for children. That's a real point of controversy if you don't see that alike. You know, my wife and I don't agree on the best foods and where we ought to go eat. And she says she doesn't have an opinion, but I know she does have an opinion. And so I don't have as much opinion, so I keep saying just wherever you want to go, that's fine with me, you know. Because there are times that it's not about necessarily being in agreement, it's about deferring to one another and giving to one another. That's what marriage is about to a large degree. You know, there are things that are important to me, and I appreciate when my spouse, knowing they are important to me, make sure that we do or have or agree on those things. And there are things that are important to her that aren't particularly important to me, and if I will give to her in that way, then the balance and the beauty of it is pretty good. You know, one of the keys is that we cannot, in our marriages, give up on oneness. Because being of one flesh, and there's a lot of implications to that. I understand that. I've debated all of those different things myself from time to time. But that oneness should be what we cherish. That oneness should be what we're working toward. You know, marriage, just passed through my mind right quick there. Sandy and I just got married. I'm preaching. I was preaching a year before we were married. And I get up in the pulpit on a Sunday night. We're just back, you know, from our honeymoon. We've just kind of gotten settled back into regular life. And there's a note on the podium. And it was there as though it was an announcement, and I just almost read it out loud. But I thought, you know, again, I looked at it, and then I looked up, and there's this teenage boy sitting right there that has just got the biggest smile on his face. He cannot help but the fact that he's about to bust out laughing. Because the note reads, marriage is like a bath. When you first get in, it's really nice, but after a while, it ain't so hot. and he was hoping beyond all hope that I would read that without, you know, as soon as I saw it. But I was smart enough not to. I exacted my vengeance on him a little bit later. But we all know that, and if we've been married any length of time, and I'm saying any length of time, I'm talking like 6 months or more, right? We realize that we get into ruts pretty quickly, and if we're not careful, we end up with a marriage that's sort of a hard, crusty shell of what we would like for it to be. It's sort of like I think the illustrations I put out on the paper there. Sometimes it's like a set of old tires that are getting hard and don't ride very smooth anymore. You know, my truck here not long ago, I put a new set of tires on it. And I buy a really good tire, and it gives me a lot of good miles. But at the end of it, it's not so much that the tread is gone, it's that it's hard now. It's hard. And when I put the new tires on it, I thought, wow, man, that is so smooth again. Well, then quickly I realized that I think the shocks are gone now because now I've got the smooth ride back, and now so now I've got to get shocks. But anyway, it's just not riding the way it used to. It's not as smooth as the way it used to. And the trick always then is, what do we do to get marriage back to what either we saw it being as we started out, or how do we get it to be what we had hoped it would be? How do we change to get where we want to be? And since I would deem that that's one of the major struggles of marriage, at least in this session, I wanted that to be the main thing that we talked about. There's a book. Some of you may have seen this book. On the headings there on page 4 there, it is the first heading. There's a book that's entitled Do One Thing Different. Anyone ever seen that book? Is that familiar to anyone? It's an interesting book. I think the name is O'Sandlin, I think the author. But it's just called Do One Thing Different. The arguments that he makes in that book, he says, if your relationship, any relationship, is in a rut, if it's sort of frozen in time, and it's a little hard and crusty and riding a little rough and it's a little bumpy, he says that what you have to do is you break the pattern by doing one thing different. And he doesn't even suggest that it's got to be one specific thing. He just says, do one thing different. When a relationship gets in a little bit of a rut, that's sometimes all it takes, is do one thing different. And it can change the whole dynamic of a troubled relationship. You know, we know the old definition of insanity. You know, insanity is defined as doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result than what we do all the time. You do the same thing over again, you get the same exact result. That's just simply the reality that we live in. Now, one of our struggles is we want to make our relationship better. Maybe at this particular given time, our spouse does not, or at least does not seem to want to. Now, by even saying that, I feel like I ought to qualify that with a statement, and that is that in a marriage, it has to be okay for me to have some down days and my wife to have to take my load for a while, help pick me up, not expect me to be on top of everything and not expect me to be the person that she knows I'm trying to be, because we all have difficult days, right? And it's got to be okay that not everybody has to be on the top of their game every day, because it's also got to be the case that when she's having a particularly difficult day and a particularly stressful time, I've got to be the one that's picking up the slack, and I've got to be the one that's carrying the most of the load these days. I'm going to say this, and I say it. It's not private information, but I literally say it, and I would suggest you not say anything to my wife about it. Okay? No, and I'm not kidding about this. I'm not kidding about this. My wife, their family, is struggling because her dad has pretty bad dementia right now, and he doesn't know it. Now, you say, well, most people don't know it. I'm saying no, he doesn't know it. He denies it. No, I didn't do that. No, I didn't hide the car keys. I didn't hide this or hide that last night, but he did. And they spend all their time looking for things. We now have tile tags on everything that they have. Sandy and her sister are putting tile tags on everything, and her dad doesn't even know they're there. And so every time Sandy is with her dad for a few hours, and they live about an hour away, and she goes up to try to help her mom and encourage the situation, but every time she goes, when she comes back, she is wasted. Emotionally, she's gone for the day. And if I expected her on those times to be lifting me up, and I got angry if she didn't lift me up, how selfish would that be? That would be extraordinarily selfish. Because you've got to realize that we all have difficult times, we all have bad days. And we've got to be there for one another. And that kind of gets me to the second point on the page there, and that is that you, and I mean individually, you need to be the person who makes the first move. You want to make things better? Then you make the first move. I cannot tell you, well, I can tell you, every troubled marriage that I have ever seen and ever counseled, almost 100%. At some point in the discussion, you got to that point to where the wife is waiting on the husband to act right, And the husband, well, I'd be acting right if she was doing better on this, that, or the other. The problem is we're constantly waiting for the other person to go first. And this gets me back to the simplicity argument. What's one of the greatest biblical arguments for Christianity is that you go first. And why do you go first? Because Jesus went first. That's who He was. And that's who He's asking me to be. Romans chapter 5? Yeah. Right there in that section, God commended His love toward us, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Our God went first. For God so loved the world that He gave. These are fundamental principles, right? This is the easy stuff in Scripture. And the easy stuff in Scripture keeps reminding us that God went first. He didn't wait for us to go first. God went first. And I think you can argue that what God wants us to do in our relationships is He wants you to go first. And you say, well, are you pointing at me or my wife? Right? Yes. Yes. You. You. You see, we could have a grammar lesson here. You is a singular pronoun. And you always applies to somebody other than you if you're saying it. But if you're hearing it, it's always straight to me. Right? Now, you can say it in a broader sense. Some people in the South say, you all. And I always thought that was silly. I don't say that. Then I got to New York and they thought these Southerners talked bad and they talked about yuns. Yuns? What are you talking about? What kind of language are you speaking? And then I talked to somebody, they were from somewhere up in the Northeast, and they said, "Use guys." I'm like, what? Where did that come from? Don't talk about Southerners. Me. I have to go first. To look like Jesus, to be following the example of my God, I have to go first. Bill O'Hanlon writes this, it's on the bottom page 4. If you change your part of an interpersonal pattern, the other person will often change theirs as a result of your change. You see, the thing is, if we're in a relationship with someone who does not particularly at this time want to change, asking them to change, demanding that they change, is going to get us absolutely nowhere. But if we will change, we can bring people with us. We can motivate people. Again, from the simplicity argument, what's the greatest rule of Christian conduct that we have? I ask that knowing that there's not a single answer for that. It's according to what you were thinking. It's according to where you went first. Most people are going to go one of two places. One person is going to go to the place where Jesus is asked, what's the first and great commandment? Matthew chapter 22, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And the second is like to it, love your neighbor as yourself. Love God, love one another. Okay? That's a good answer for that. The other answer for that is the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have others do to you. So again, that's going first. That's you acting towards someone else the way you would have them act toward you. It works in marriage easier than it works anywhere, but it works everywhere, right? You want somebody to be more kind to you? What do? Go up to them and say, hey, you don't need to be more kind to me. No. You walk up to them and you're kind to them. You're kind to them, they will tend to be kind back to you. You know, Paul said that thing about heaping coals of fire on their head. He's talking about acting toward people better than they act toward you. And sometimes we do it just for that reason. And if you can't find a better reason, that's okay. It'll heap coals of fire on people's head. But, you know, but there's a better reason. And the better reason is to change people. I change people by changing me. I'll change the people around me quicker by changing myself than I will be by trying to ask them to change or demanding them to change or trying to prompt them to change. I need to work on me. I need to work on me. See this note I wrote down right here? I didn't type it anywhere. I wrote it down. And it's been bothering me because I'm embarrassed to read it. But it's so true. You find some great truths in very unlikely places. Again, do the math. I'm 64. What decade was I a teenager in? 70s. Yeah. Yeah. You know, right? He didn't do the math. He was closer to doing the memory than the math there. Now see, he's a lot younger than me. He's a lot younger than me, right? Right? Yeah, okay, all right. But he knows. Well, I mean, on your XM, is the 70s on 7 1-year channels? Oh, you don't... I got a transistor. Okay. All right, so I'm driving through town the other day, listening to the 70s, and I hear this great line in a song that I absolutely hate. I mean, it's not I hate the song, I just can't stand to listen to this guy sing. I can't stand to listen to this guy sing. It just, his voice is just, it bothers me so bad. But he gave the line, and it's like it was the first time I'd ever heard the line. And I thought, oh wow, that's good. That is so good. Because he made a point. And the point is, if I'm going to change relationships, I've got to give more to you than what I expect you to give to me. I've got, and here's the line. Now Keith, my son-in-law back there. You know what song I'm talking about already? See, he knows songs pretty well. Now, with all due respect, can he lead singing or what? He can lead singing, okay? He's got 3 talents. But he's going to know this song, so I'm going to get kidded about this for months. But the line of the song is, if you give a little more than you're asking for, your love will turn the key. It's the key to the relationship. It's the key to making the relationship work. And the simplicity of that is beautiful, but it's so true. What do we need to do? We give more than we're asking for. Just a little bit, not a lot. But we give a little more than we're asking for in marriage. That's what we're doing. We're giving more than we're asking for. And it's amazing the difference that'll make in your life. Anybody but Keith recognize what song that is? Ken, are you there? No? Okay. Yeah. What is it, Brent? Oh, no, I wish it was. Who is it, Keith? Who said that? Will? It sounds better if you say the Bee Gees. But who was the singer? Close. It was Andy. There was Andy and Barry Gibb. They sang that falsetto, high, squeaky voice thing. And it's like, I can't stand to hear these guys sing. I don't like their music. I never liked their music. And I'm sitting there listening to it, and I hear this line, and I'm thinking, oh, I hope you didn't write that. I hope somebody wrote that I would have enjoyed listening to sing, you know. But that's what it is. It's a song called I Just Want to Be Your Everything. It's Andy Gibb, 1977. But it's true. But it's true. You know. God gave more than He asked for. John 3:16, Romans chapter 5. It's consistent. Our God gave more than He asked for. He does ask for something. But He gave us so much more than He asked for that what He asked for doesn't sound like much at all now, does it? Now some of you may be thinking, He asked us to dedicate our life to Him. Yes, He did. That sounds like a lot, right? Until you realize that He gave us our life. I mean, literally gave us our life, and then gave us our life after we threw it away. Amen. He gave us our life again. Gave us a chance at it again. He gave us more than He was asking for. So the question is, what keeps you from going first? Go with me to 1 Corinthians 13, I'm sorry. 1 Corinthians 13. In that love chapter and in the definition of love, there's some big stuff there. Big stuff in small words. Big stuff in small words. One of the words that I love is the end of verse 5. You know, he gives us that basic definition in 4 through 7. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. Oh, stop for a minute. It does not insist on its own way. That's love. Anybody ready for me to go on? Get off of that one? It's not irritable or resentful. There's my word, but I'm going to come back to it. Verse 6, it does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. It love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. That word resentful is a pretty big word. It's a pretty big word. When you flesh it out a little bit more, what it's saying is that love doesn't keep score. Anybody keep score? Anybody keep score in your marriage? We need to sing a verse of Just As I Am, because folks, we all keep score. Now, some better more than others. Some write it down. Others just keep it in their mind, you know. But we're all kind of keeping score. Amen. Now, I'm going to ask you a question that I'm going to ask you not to answer out loud, and don't poke your spouse over this one, okay, if you're married and your spouse is right here with you. In our relationships, we know right now who's giving the most and who's taking the most. Is that not true? That is true. Now, it may just be today. It may just be this week. It may be this month. It may be this year. But if we're honest, we know who's giving the most and who's taking the most, because we tend, if we're not careful, we have to really work at it not to do so, we tend to keep score. We tend to keep score. But I think our God challenges us to be a people who do not keep score. That's what resentful means. What is resentful? I mean, even the way we use the word. Resentful means I resented the fact that I did something that you did not repay. I did this and you said nothing about it. We're keeping score. I'm ahead of you and you didn't say thank you. We're resentful. That's what that word means. But he says love doesn't keep score. Two phrases to end with for this session. We may just kind of start off with them next session for just a few moments. Number one, I want you to ponder these things. Ponder them, think on them, roll them around in your head, find some way to apply them. The first phrase is this: you can't go first if you're waiting in line. You can't go first if you're waiting in line. And what I mean waiting in line, I mean waiting in line for someone else to move first. Waiting for someone else to make the first move. Anybody here love negotiations? I love negotiations. I used to love to buy a car. Don't love to buy a car anymore. Number one, if you buy a car right now, everybody wants full price. And plus, we haven't bought a car at full price in forever because my father-in-law, my wife's dad, worked for General Motors for 30 years, and we get the employee discount. And yes, actually bought a new car a week ago and got a discount on it from a dealer. And I looked at the guy because I love negotiation. Like I say, I'm not afraid of conflict. I love negotiation. And my wife looks at me like, can we get more? And I said, well, I'm sitting there saying, the guy's standing right here. I said, well, I just looked at Jeff and his eyes told me that we got the discount. We're not getting any more because that dealership is selling cars above this price, not below. Mm-hmm. Right? But we got ours well below because of the discount. And because what we'd found out is a lot of people aren't even honoring the discount at all because they're selling them above market. So Jeff kind of looked back at me and he said, that's right. You got what you got and that's all of it, you know. I love a good negotiation. I love to buy a house. I bought several. I've built several. I've built several just to sell them, basically. But I love the negotiation because I love not leaving anything on the table, and I love the back and forth of negotiation, and I just really get into that. One guy calls me one day. I've got a house for sale. He calls me right off the bat. He says, well, just give me your bottom dollar. And I literally on the phone said, sir, that's not how this works. I said, I just gave you a price. You make me an offer. That's how this works. You don't come to me and right off the bat say, what's your bottom dollar? I said, there's my offer. Let's talk. And I didn't sell him the house because I didn't really want to because he kind of offended me right there. And I didn't want to deal with him anymore, you know? But I was nice to him. He was nice to me. But I'm like, that's not how this thing works. We negotiate this thing, right? You're waiting in line. Can't go first when you're waiting in line. You can't go first when you're waiting for somebody else to do it. And the second thing I think is very important. I'll just say it and then we'll quit, so we'll be close to being on time. And that is that you can't get where you want to go alone. Not in marriage, you can't. If you were to, and not that you need to, and I'm not asking you to, I'm not demanding that you do it, because then one of you is going to come off hating me by tomorrow. But how long has it been since you had a discussion about where you wanted to go in your relationship, where you want your relationship to be, what kind of marriage do you really want to have, what are you really looking for out of your marriage? And no matter what the answer to that is, you can't get that by yourself. You can't get that by being resentful. You can't get that by not going first. You can't get that by waiting for the other person always. You can't. It won't happen. It just won't happen. You can't get where you want to go alone. Now, that's true of marriage, but it's also true of every other relationship as well. You want a relationship to move forward, whatever that relationship is, you're not going to get where you want to go by yourself. You're going to have to work on it. You're going to have to put some effort into it. Okay, we'll stop for right now. We'll consider some of these thoughts as we move forward into our next hour. Let's have a few minutes of just take a bathroom break. There's some snacks for you, so let's enjoy a few minutes of fellowship. Thank you.